What's up, y'all? How's everyone doing today? We are week 3 into the 500 movies in a year challenge. This week I managed to watch 15 movies because I was snowed in. I wanted to squeeze in more than that, but I started burning myself out, so I had to slow down a little bit. But we're just gonna breeze through most of these movies just because I do have to keep it under 10 minutes. But the first movie of the week is Malum, which is a horror remake of a movie called Last Shift that was made about a decade ago by the same director. And in my opinion, I hate to say it, but this feels like a pointless remake. I didn't necessarily care for Last Shift when it came out, but out of the two movies, I think Last Shift is the better one. I don't think Malum does anything with the extra budget, and I think the story and the protagonists are just better in Last Shift. And I like how Last Shift, the main thing it's got going for it over Malum is the way it ends. It's kind of ambiguous, which works in its favor, whereas Malum is on the nose and it doesn't work for it in this context. Moving on to Funny Games, which is considered one of the most disturbing horror movies of all time from what I know about it. This is the original one from, I believe, 1997. And I think the reason why it's considered so disturbing, or at least it was when it came out, is for one thing, the killers are very nonchalant about torturing this family, but also something happens to a character that it generally doesn't happen in horror movies. They're kind of a protected type of character generally, and they weren't protected in this movie basically. But I didn't hate the movie, but it wasn't as disturbing as I was expecting. But that's my fault for having different expectations because it did come out in the 90s. Moving on to The Bride of Frankenstein. If y'all know anything about me, I love older movies, especially these old monster movies. I love the original Frankenstein, and The Bride of Frankenstein may be one of the best sequels ever. I think it holds up real well, at least for someone like me who's very interested in the history of film. I think the effects were amazing for its time. I like how they humanized the monster. I love the design of the bride. My only nitpick is that the bride isn't in it enough. By the time she's introduced, the movie's basically over. But that was by design, and that's just me. Look, if I was going to just complain about anything. But great movie, and I recommend watching it if you haven't. Moving on to The Void, which is a kind of a Lovecraftian horror movie. Whenever I first saw it, I was a teenager, and this is one of the first movies to introduce me to horror that wasn't just like Freddy or Jason or Chucky, like something that could be more existential. And for that alone, I do appreciate it. And it's on Tubi for free, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's where I watched it, so I do recommend it. Moving on to the Banshees of Inisherin. This isn't going to be for everybody. I did have to watch this movie with subtitles, especially whenever Barry Keoghan's character was on screen because of the thick accents. Um, it's it's kind of a movie where not a whole lot happens. It's about these two friends who randomly they're not friends anymore, and one friend doesn't know why. So part of the movie is us trying to figure out why this other friend cut him off, and then the other part of the movie is trying to see if they'll remedy it. And some people didn't like the ending. It worked for me, but it's not going to work for everyone. So just know that going into it. Next up, a movie called Glorious. The only reason I know this exists is because a creator, and I cannot remember his name to save my life, but made a TikTok skit about a sentient glory hole. And one of the top comments was about this movie, so I decided to seek it out. And I had a wonderful time. This is such a fun little silly movie. Basically about this man in a public bathroom with this sentient glory hole, and craziness happens. I'm not going to spoil too much. I will say that the glory hole is voiced by J.K. Simmons, and that alone should sell it. Moving on to August Underground, which I just wanted to check off my disturbing horror movie bucket list. And this is not a great movie. When it came out, it was trying to mimic snuff films, and people thought it was real at the time. It's not. The only thing that it's got going for it is the effects, are decent for what they were doing, but it's just an edge lord type of just shocking to be shocking type of thing. There's no narrative really going on. It's a slog to get through, and I definitely cannot recommend it. Moving on to a movie that I've been wanting to watch since it came out. I watched it in what was supposed to be ideal conditions. I was told to watch it with AirPods, watch it on my laptop at nighttime in complete darkness to get the full effect of it. and I didn't care for it. And in hindsight, I shouldn't have expected anything else because I don't necessarily care about analog horror. It doesn't have an effect on me, really. And I hate that because I do appreciate what the filmmaker was going for. But yeah, an hour and 40 minutes of not a whole lot going on, which generally I don't have a problem with, but it just didn't work for me. It definitely would probably work better in short story format, but I'm pretty sure it's based off of a short story off of the creator's YouTube channel. I still need to check it out. And definitely watch it and form your own opinion. It just didn't do it for me, and I hate that. Moving on to May December, which I believe is kind of inspired by a real life situation where a student hooked up, or a teacher hooked up with her student, and then whenever she got out of prison, they ended up together, which is horrifying. And sadly, obviously, it's something that happens in real life, and this movie bringing attention to that. And I think this movie was good, even though very kind of you know troubling or problematic subject matter, but I think the movie was good. The acting was great. Again, it's just I hate that it's something that happens, and a lot of times, victims don't even realize they're victims even years after the fact, and it's very heartbreaking. Moving on to Marriage Story, which you've probably heard everything about it. Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver given the acting performances of both of their lives, in my opinion, but more so than just the one argument scene that you've seen everywhere and the memes that you've seen. Even their subtle acting at times, just like this movie is peak in my opinion. And I think the qualities and the attributes that both of the characters have, I think, are very realistic for a marriage that's falling apart. As a divorcee myself, I think it's very accurate with how it's portrayed. I will say it makes me appreciate the fact that me and my ex were able to end things amicably and we didn't have to get lawyers involved, because in Marriage Story, the movie is basically them like trying to separate, and like lawyers are involved and they have a kid, and just it's a mess, but the situation's a mess, but the movie is wonderful and I cannot recommend it enough. Moving on to Speak No Evil, which I'm a little bit more hesitant to recommend because it is a slow burn horror movie, which doesn't offer a whole lot of satisfying payoff, because it's about basically the dangers of being passive, especially when it comes to your loved ones, whenever there's danger involved. And a lot of people do not like the ending because, again, it's about what happens when you don't do anything. So whenever these characters don't do anything to protect themselves or their loved ones, there's consequences. And that doesn't jive for everybody, and that's probably a spoiler, but if you're going to watch the movie, I feel like you may want to know that going in, just so you don't feel like you're wasting your time. Moving on to A Cure for Wellness, which is something I've been wanting to watch for years, and I finally got around to it. I've heard this movie described as a combination of Shutter Island and something else, but it's definitely Shutter Island-esque. This man in this, I don't remember if it was an island, but they're at this health facility, and he's trying to figure out the situations that's going on, the mystery. Movie's probably too long at 2.5 hours. They definitely could have trimmed some fat off of it, but I still enjoyed it. Moving on to Emma, which is a period piece starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Mia Goth, two actors that I really, really love. Anya Taylor-Joy, my favorite actor currently, right up there with Timothée Chalamet. She's probably just barely past old Timmy Tim. But I'm a sucker for period pieces, whether it's the romanticized versions like this, or if it's the more gritty kind like Nightingale. They're my weakness, but I loved Emma. I love the acting. I love the set pieces, and I have less than a minute. So The Night Eats the World, a zombie movie, very slow burn, not going to work for everybody. Works for me, about this man in an apartment trying to survive zombies and trying to make his way out. And yeah, Grotesque was the last movie that I watched, and this is a Japanese horror movie that was basically just made for shock value. A lot of gore, very disturbing, a lot of essay. I do not recommend it. This is the 4th time that I've made this video. Hopefully, I'm actually allowed to finish it this time. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I will see y'all later. Bye.